On a June morning in 2023, the Atlantic stretched out cold and indifferent, a graveyard already infamous for swallowing giants. Far below its shifting gray skin rested Titanic, her bones a steel dissolved into rusticless, her story fossilized in myth. And toward that watery tomb descended Titan, a vessel no bigger than a delivery van, packed with 5 men chasing history. Hours later, there will be no signals, no sonar pings, only a strange tremor deep in the water, too fleeting to explain, too final to ignore. On the surface, families waited, clocks were wound down, headlines tallied oxygen as if tragedy could be measured in hours. But the truth had already slipped into silence. This was not just a lost submersible. It was a parable written in carbon fiber and arrogance, bolted shut against the inevitability of the sea. And while the ocean gave no answers, the world above spun theories, rumors, and theater, until it was no longer clear whether we were searching for survivors or for a story to believe. There's a recording. It's faint, static-filled, the kind of audio that feels like it should never have left the abyss where it was born. A sound, not quite an explosion, not quite a scream, just a concussive sigh. The U.S. Navy classified it as an anomaly, a blip in the Atlantic, deep beneath where the Titanic herself sleeps. And here's the thing, this noise happened hours before the world realized something was wrong. Hours before families on the surface still imagined their loved ones cramped inside a carbon fiber tube, hopeful, shivering, joking nervously about history. Hours before texts went unanswered, before GPS stopped pinging. They didn't know it then, but by the time the headlines screamed about a missing submersible, the story was already over. The Titan hadn't vanished. It had been erased in a blink, crumpled by pressures no human body can fathom, silenced in one violent instant. And yet, somehow, that's not even the strangest part, because what followed wasn't just grief, it was theater. It was a drawn-out, grotesque illusion of a rescue mission when those in power may have known the truth all along. A performance that held the world hostage for 5 full days, dangling hope like bait over a chasm, a noise at the bottom of the ocean, a billionaire-funded voyage into the graveyard of the Titanic, a timeline full of gaps, contradictions, and withheld information. Was this just tragedy? Or was it something darker? A modern spectacle of hubris, secrets, and corporate denial stitched together with money and media spin? This isn't just the story of a sub lost at sea. It's about the price of chasing ghosts, the arrogance of thinking steel and carbon can outweigh the crushing silence of the deep, and the unsettling possibility that some people already knew the ending before the rest of us had even heard the opening note. The year is 2023, and humanity is living in an age of contradictions. We can beam video calls across continents in the blink of an eye. We can land billionaires in low Earth orbit just to sip champagne in zero gravity. Yet somehow, we still lose track of airplanes. We still misplace submarines. Progress isn't linear. It's more like a drunk staggering through a dark alley, sometimes forward, sometimes face first into a wall. The North Atlantic, though, that graveyard of ambition, cold, endless, merciless. It's not a place that forgives mistakes. It is where Titanic herself rests, 1,000 tiny tragedies frozen in rust and silt. A ship designed to defy fate, broken like a toy, and ever since, humans have been drawn back to her like moths to a burned-out light bulb. Divers, explorers, millionaires with more money than sense. They all want to stare into that abyss, to touch the bones of history. Into this climate came OceanGate, not a navy, not a government. A private company born in the Silicon Valley spirit of move fast and break things. Except what they were breaking was not software, it was safety protocol. Their vessel, the Titan, wasn't some polished military-grade machine. It was an experimental submersible cobbled together from carbon fiber and ambition, controlled not with hardened instruments, but with a video game controller you could buy at Walmart. But that was the age we were in. Billionaires wanted adventures, headlines wanted drama, and the public wanted to gawk. It was the era of live-streamed space launches and Instagram-ready expeditions. Why should the Titanic's watery tomb be any different? The irony is unbearable. The Titanic sank in 1912 because of arrogance, because men in suits believed themselves invincible against nature. And in 2023, more than a century later, men in different suits, now corporate, not Edwardian, repeated the same mistake. They built a vessel not quite tested, not quite approved, but sold as visionary. They invited passengers to pay $250,000 each for the privilege of gambling with the Atlantic itself. The cultural stage was set perfectly. A world obsessed with spectacle, a company chasing prestige, a sea that had already proven it could turn dreams into nightmares. And in that setting, 5 men climbed into the Titan, sealing themselves inside a capsule no bigger than a minivan, descending into history's most famous grave. The ocean, patient and eternal, waited. Let's talk about the Titan, not as a machine, but as a character, because in every tragedy, there's always that one presence looming larger than life, both hero and villain, both vessel and coffin. Titan wasn't sleek. She wasn't majestic. She was stubby, improvised, claustrophobic, like a steel thermos wrapped in carbon fiber. A contraption that looked more like an oversized experiment than something you'd trust to dive 12,500 feet into the pitch black. Inside, it was stripped bare. No cushioned seats, no windows except for a single porthole at the front, and no control panels buzzing with reassuring lights. Instead, passengers sat cross-legged on the floor, knees pressed against each other like children in a makeshift fort. Their view of the outside world, if they were lucky enough to see anything at all, depended on a camera feed displayed on a monitor. And piloting this multi-million-dollar death capsule? A modified Logitech game controller. The absurdity writes itself. But it wasn't just a machine, it was the man behind it, Stockton Rush. He cast himself as a pioneer, a boundary pusher, someone destined to outwit the bureaucrats who clung to regulations like life vests. In his eyes, safety was just a drag on progress. He bragged about using off-the-shelf parts, about rejecting certifications. He painted himself as a visionary, while critics whispered he was more gambler than genius. Some admired him, some called him reckless. But everyone agreed he believed utterly in the Titan. And then there were the passengers, each one with their own reasons for climbing aboard. A British billionaire seeking adventure, a father and son hoping to bond over shared history, a Titanic expert whose entire life was wrapped up in the shipwreck below. 5 men with 5 different stories, sealed together in one small tube. What bound them wasn't just a dive, it was trust. Trust in Stockton Rush, trust in OceanGate, trust in technology that had been questioned by industry veterans again and again. In that sense, Titan wasn't just a submersible. She was a stage, a floating metaphor of human arrogance, dreams, and denial. The passengers weren't only explorers. They were believers, stepping into something closer to a cult ritual than a routine expedition, a leap of faith into the mouth of the Atlantic, with Titan as both altar and offering. And once the hatch was bolted shut from the outside, there was no turning back. The ocean had them, body and soul. Picture the dive itself. June morning, off the coast of Newfoundland. The sea is calm, the kind of deceptive calm that almost feels like a setup, like nature holding its breath. The Titan slips beneath the surface, disappearing inch by inch until waves close over it, erasing all trace of the 5 men sealed inside. From that moment, they are ghosts traveling downward into eternal night. Communication was supposed to be simple. Regular pings sent back to the support ship above. A lifeline of dots and dashes proving they were still out there. still breathing recycled air in that cramped little tube. But about an hour and 45 minutes into the descent, the signal stopped. The dots went dark. No more updates. Just silence. On the surface, at first, it was brushed off. Maybe interference. Maybe a glitch. The ocean is full of static, after all. But anyone who's ever stared at a missing heartbeat on a monitor knows how that silence feels. It spreads. It gnaws. It tells you something has shifted, and not for the better. By the time the support crew admitted something was wrong, Titan had vanished into the black. No beacons, no signals, no coordinates. Just gone. The sub might as well have been swallowed whole. That was the first disturbance. The shiver that ran through the entire world when news broke. Submersible missing near Titanic wreck. Instantly, it became mythic, an echo of 1912. The ship that couldn't sink, mirrored by a vessel that shouldn't have dived. Families clung to hope, imagining the men trapped but alive, waiting for rescue. The media spun narratives of dwindling oxygen, ticking clocks, dramatic possibilities of survival. But beneath the theater, those who truly understood the deep sea whispered the unspeakable. If something catastrophic had happened down there, it wouldn't be a slow tragedy. It would be instantaneous. Absolute. The kind of ending where even the word rescue feels like a cruel joke. Still, the search began. Ships and planes mobilized. Experts were brought in. The world leaned in, glued to the spectacle. But the first disturbance wasn't just a loss of contact. It was a birth of uncertainty, the unsettling sense that the story unfolding in front of us might not be what we were being told. Because silence is never just silence. Sometimes it's the sound of truth being swallowed whole. It should have been simple, a vessel lost, a desperate search. But instead, the story twisted into something stranger, something theatrical. The headlines blared oxygen countdowns. 40 hours left, 24 hours left, last chance for survival. As if the 5 men were still down there, huddled in the dark, rationing breaths. It played like a Hollywood thriller, a real-time disaster movie unfolding for the public. But buried beneath the suspense was a detail most people didn't hear until much later. The U.S. Navy had already picked up an acoustic event the very morning Titan went missing, a sound consistent with an implosion. If that's true, then what was the global audience really watching? A rescue or a cover-up of a tragedy already complete? For days, news anchors spoke of tapping noises supposedly detected underwater. The idea was haunting. Survivors knocking on the hull, begging for help. But experts quickly questioned whether those sounds were anything more than sonar echoes or the ocean playing tricks. Hope and horror blurred into one confusing symphony. The contradictions piled up. Families were told not to lose faith. Officials promised every option was being pursued. Yet in backrooms, insiders whispered the timeline didn't add up, that no one could survive a catastrophic failure at that depth. And so the world held its breath, not realizing it might have been mourning ghosts the whole time. Meanwhile, the internet erupted. Memes spread, jokes about billionaires paying to meet Titanic in person. Gallows humor mixed with genuine sorrow, and the tragedy became a carnival, half search operation, half global spectacle. People were grieving, yes, but also entertained. The entire event blurred into performance art. And here's the most chilling part. The mystery wasn't just about whether the passengers were alive. It was about when the people in charge knew they weren't. Why did the search continue for so long? Was it caution protocol or something colder? A decision to withhold the truth until the world was ready to hear it? The silence deepened, and with it, suspicion. What exactly happened in those 2 lost hours between launch and disappearance? Did Titan fail slowly, with warnings ignored, or did it vanish instantly, leaving only the illusion of survival? Mystery doesn't just exist in what's missing. It thrives in what's deliberately hidden. And in this case, The shadows seemed almost scripted. The official line, Titan imploded. Catastrophic structural failure. The ocean folded the sub inward like paper, crushing it faster than the brain could register fear. End of story. But investigations always breed theories, and theories multiply like mold in the dark. Let's start with the most accepted version, carbon fiber. OceanGate had used it to build Titan's pressure hull. Despite warnings from experts, carbon fiber is strong, yes, but fatigues under repeated stress. Microscopic cracks invisible to the naked eye can spread until one day the structure just gives. Stockton Rush had bragged about innovation, about building outside the old ways of naval engineering, and maybe that worked for airplanes and bicycles. But the Atlantic isn't an investor meeting. At 12,000 feet, even a pinhole is lethal. Then there's a controller, the infamous Logitech gamepad. Was it really responsible? Probably not, but it became a symbol of recklessness, proof that a multi-million-dollar sub was cobbled together with off-the-shelf parts. It didn't matter if the real culprit was carbon fiber, a hatch seal, or a pressure vessel. People latched on the controller as a smoking gun, the punchline of an underwater tragedy. But conspiracy theories bloomed like algae. Some claimed Titan was never meant to return, that it was a vanity project doomed from the start, a gamble Stockton Rush was willing to take because hubris had blinded him to risk. Others whispered about hidden motives, insurance fraud, staged disappearance, even sabotage. Far-fetched, yes, but when information is scarce and emotions run high, people build stories to fill the void. Then came the haunting detail, the Navy's classified acoustic data. If they knew Titan imploded on day one, why stage a 5-day search? Why broadcast dwindling oxygen numbers to the world, turning grief into spectacle? One theory, officials want to be certain before making an announcement. Another, darker possibility, they knew from the start but let the performance run anyway, because hope sells better than finality. The investigation raised more questions than it answered. Wreckage was found, yes, confirming the implosion. But how much did OceanGate know about the dangers? How many warnings were ignored, silenced, or laughed off? Why did passengers trust a vessel that wasn't certified? Every theory circles the same unsettling truth. This wasn't just an accident. It was an inevitability dressed up as adventure. Titan wasn't destroyed by chance. It was destroyed by choices, stacked one atop the other, until the ocean simply collected its due. Here's where the story rips itself open, the so-called turning point. The wreckage was found. Pieces of Titan, shredded, scattered, resting eerily close to Titanic's bow, as if mocking the symmetry of history. The announcement landed like a hammer. All lives lost. Not a rescue mission. Not dwindling oxygen. A clean obliteration. But instead of relief that the truth was finally revealed, the revelation triggered a breakdown. Public, emotional, moral. Families who had clung to the televised countdowns realized they had been mourning in real time for people who were already gone. The stage suspense unraveled into rage. How could officials feed them a narrative of tapping noises and hours left when the Navy had already suspected implosion from the very start? Even worse, the myth of Stockton Rush collapsed alongside his invention. For years, he had framed himself as a visionary, a maverick pushing the frontier. Now he looked like a prophet of folly, dragging wealthy clients and a teenage boy into the abyss with him. Interviews resurfaced, Rush mocking safety regulations, calling them obstacles to innovation. Safety, he once said, is pure waste. Those words echoed louder than the implosion itself, turning his image from pioneer to pariah overnight. This was the twist. Titan wasn't just a tragedy, it was a mirror. It reflected our culture's obsession with spectacle, our willingness to gamble lives for exclusive experiences. People who once admired the passengers for their adventurous spirit began asking darker questions. Was this courage or arrogance disguised as bravery? Was this the pursuit of knowledge or tourism sold as destiny? And then, the public circus fractured into cruelty. Memes of billionaires meeting Titanic in person spread faster than official reports. A 19-year-old boy, terrified but wanting to please his father, became the butt of internet jokes. Grief was drowned out by satire, empathy replaced with schadenfreude. The breakdown wasn't just technological, it was moral. The turning point, then, wasn't the discovery of wreckage. It was a shattering realization that this wasn't a clean narrative of heroes lost at sea. It was negligence, hubris in theater, wrapped in a hollow echo of a countdown that never mattered. The Titan wasn't just crushed by the ocean. It was crushed by human pride, and our own grotesque need to watch the disaster play out like a show. The official resolution was neat, too neat. Catastrophic implosion. End of investigation. Case closed. 5 men gone. Their remains unrecoverable. Their final moments obliterated faster than thought itself. A tragedy, yes, but also convenient, because neat conclusions silence messy questions. And there are many. Why was Titan even allowed to die when countless engineers, naval experts, and former employees had sounded alarms? Letters were written, warnings documented, whistleblowers fired. Was this hubris alone, or was there a system that enabled it? Insurance loopholes, regulatory blind spots, a world so dazzled by innovation that red flags became decorations instead of stop signs? Then there's the Navy's acoustic detection. If the implosion was heard on day one, why the performance of the ticking oxygen clock? Was it simply a case of classified data held too tightly? Or was there a deliberate decision to craft a suspenseful narrative, knowing the passengers were long gone, a misstep in communication, or an orchestration of hope for the sake of optics? The passengers themselves leave questions that twist a knife. Did they feel the danger in their bones before boarding? Did they believe Stockton Rush's promises? Or did they silence their doubts because the lure of touching Titanic's grave was stronger than instinct? Most haunting of all, the 19-year-old who told relatives he was nervous, that he wasn't sure about the dive. What would he have chosen if not for the weight of family expectations? And then there are the conspiracy shadows, faint but persistent. Theories that Titan's implosion was staged to distract from other news cycles. Rumors of sabotage, whispers of deeper secrets buried with Titanic. Fantasies, maybe. But every unanswered question leaves a vacuum, and vacuums breed invention. The resolution we're given is clean. The reality is jagged. What lingers isn't just grief, it's suspicion, and the unsettling sense that Titan was never just about exploration. It was about ego, money, and theater. The implosion silenced the passengers, but it didn't silence the questions clawing at the surface. And maybe that's the cruelest truth. The ocean isn't the only abyss in this story. There's also the abyss of human denial, where answers drown just as easily as bodies. When the debris was cataloged and headlines cooled, what lingered wasn't just the loss of 5 lives. It was a sour taste a culture caught watching itself in the mirror. The Titan didn't just implode under the Atlantic. It imploded in the public imagination, leaving behind fragments of hubris, grief, and mockery. The families were shattered, of course. A son ripped from a mother, a father who dragged his child into the depths, a wife who lost both husband and father in the same instant. Stockton Rush's name became synonymous not with innovation, but with arrogance. The man who thought he could outweat the laws of physics and ended up proving them in the most brutal way possible. OceanGate suspended operations, but too late. Its legacy was already inked in disaster. The industry felt the tremors, too. Deep-sea exploration, once a niche of wonder, was suddenly scrutinized under floodlights of fear. Regulators scrambled to reassert authority. Scientists who had warned about carbon fiber holes now sounded less like naysayers and more like prophets. And lurking in the background was Titanic herself, forever cursed to attract dreamers who underestimate the sea. But the cultural legacy? That's the part that stings. The memes, the jokes, the way people turned tragedy into entertainment before bodies were even declared lost. They paid for it. Some sneered, as if wealth negates humanity. Yet others mourned, pointing out the obscene cruelty of ridiculing a terrified teenager who hadn't even wanted to board the sub. The aftermath wasn't just a debate about safety. It became a referendum on empathy. And then there's the deeper shadow. The Titan disaster revealed how modern tragedy becomes performance. The oxygen countdown plastered across screens, the phantom tapping noises hyped as hope. It wasn't just rescue, it was spectacle. A 5-day play for a global audience, knowing the ending was already written in the deep. So what's the legacy? A cautionary tale. Yes, a corporate failure, certainly, but also a cultural marker of how quickly we turn horror into theater and theater into hashtags. The Titan isn't just wreckage on the ocean floor. It's a mirror held up to us, and what we saw looking back wasn't noble. There's a cruel symmetry here. Titanic sank because men believed themselves untouchable, masters of steel and steam. A century later, Titan perished for the same reason. Different technology, same arrogance. The ocean doesn't care about progress, about innovation, about the size of your bank account. It swallows hubris the way a furnace swallows paper. Instantly, absolutely. What unsettles me most isn't the implosion itself. It's how quickly it was turned into content. Oxygen countdowns ticked on TV screens like it was a game show. Tapping noises spun into ghostly hope. Memes flooded timelines before the wreckage was even confirmed. Somewhere along the line, empathy drowned too. We stopped seeing 5 humans in a tube and started seeing archetypes. The billionaire, the daredevil, the father and son. Labels are easier to laugh at than lives. But think of this. In the last seconds before pressure crushed everything, there was no billionaire, no adventurer, no pioneer. Just 5 people sitting shoulder to shoulder, breathing the same stale air, hoping for another sunrise they'd never see. Whatever arrogance led them there, whatever spectacle we built afterward, that moment was purely human. The Titan will rust now on the ocean floor, joining Titanic in her eternal graveyard. A ship built to never sink, a sub built to rewrite exploration. Both reduced to ruins, monuments not a triumph, but to the delusion that we can bargain with the abyss. And maybe that's the final reflection. The sea is not our stage. It is not a backdrop for adventure or wealth or legend. It is the oldest truth on earth, vast, indifferent, eternal. We return to it again and again, offering our machines our pride, our very lives. And every time, it answers the same way, with silence. Hello everyone, and thank you so much for listening. As usual, please leave any comments or feedback you may have, and I hope to see you all again in the next case.